Charlie, my friend, it's so fantastic to see you again. We had the most amazing discussion the last time, and I know that this interview that you and I are going to have now is going to help so many people. You're phenomenal. You have a fantastic artistic background, but transitioned over to become one of the leading meditation teachers and probably the foremost leader in when it comes to teaching and understanding and doing workshops on lucid dreaming. You've helped me. You've helped millions. You're an absolute inspiration. So welcome to Doctor's Talks, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. What an intro. Thank you so much. I hope I live up to it.
Oh, you definitely do. Charlie, do you mind by just sharing with the audience, a little bit more detail about your brief background that I gave from where you began and where you've landed up and what you do now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, essentially now I write books about sleep and lucid dreaming, and then I travel around and give seminars, workshops, and immersive retreats on lucid dreaming and sleep-related subjects. My main things, my kind of the passion project that lies within what I do is working with veterans, military veterans and people who are living with trauma, because lucid dreaming is a very powerful way to help integrate not only nightmares, but trauma. And then also another big part of my work is looking at the more spiritual aspects of lucid dreaming. I lived in a Buddhist temple for 7 years and was taught by within the Tibetan Buddhist lineage. So I have kind of that going on too.
Amazing. And before all of this, tell them what you used to do.
Oh yeah, I used to put on breakdance events. So I used to be in a moderately successful hip hop group of like break dancers and graffiti artists and rappers and stuff like that. I trained as an actor in my 20s, did a degree in script writing. So yeah, I came from a completely different creative background. But funny you said that, because just recently someone was asking me, out of all the training I've done in the past, what has prepared me best for workshops and teaching? And I said the acting, definitely, the stagecraft, because stuff's in books, stuff's on YouTube. Now with AI, stuff is everywhere. You can gain information any way you look. But the communication of information, which is the real crux, is where you really get people's hearts. That's a communication skill. And I think kind of acting and improv and that sort of training is the best for learning how to communicate deeply.
I love that. In fact, I was thinking that very thing as well. And then also what also struck me is that the acting and the creative part of you has really enabled you to get in touch with that deep, holistic part of you, the unconscious mind and really, because you're the creative side. So it's been quite an interesting, I don't see it as radically different. I see it as a beautiful transition.
Very good point. I mean, if you look at the earliest actors were actually shamans. If you look at the earliest shamanic ritual, it was it was embodying or acting like the animal spirit. Mm. So you would take on the form of the animal spirit. And this is how they were channeling the animal. Well, yeah, they were channeling, but what is channeling? If you look at actors, they are really top actors. They're essentially channeling the experience of the person, of the role that they're playing. And the really great actors, I believe, are literally channeling the character of the story. So yeah, the earlier shamans were actors essentially. So I think, just as you say, I don't think there's a divide here. I think the kind of creative arts and the spiritual arts are very, very close. And if you look at how much creativity there is in spiritual practice, I mean, go to a Catholic mass, it's a wonderful theatrical performance, just like a Buddhist puja. So you have this thing about embodiment, which I think is much closer than we might think.
I love that. I'm so glad we brought that up. So Charlie, explain to the audience what lucid dreaming is and how you have made it so practical. And then I'd love to have actually got your recent research, because you actually have done some incredible research with PTSD and you reference that. I'd love to then transition over to talking about your work with PTSD and how it works. But let's start with what is lucid dreaming and how can people start doing it?
So a lucid dream is a dream where you know that you're dreaming as the dream is happening. So if you ever had an experience where you're sound asleep, you're dreaming away, but in the dream, you go, oh, wow, I'm in a dream right now. And I can choose what to do. I can fly, or I can change the narrative, or I can choose to wake myself up, whatever it might be. That's a lucid dream. The moment that you're in a dream and know that you're dreaming and then can direct the dream at will, that's lucid dreaming. Now, many people listening might have thought, I've had that experience already. But for those who haven't, I would say, have you ever had a nightmare where in the nightmare you've gone, I've got to wake up. If you have, that was also a lucid dream, because the moment you acknowledged there was a place to wake up to, you had indirectly acknowledged that you were asleep, that you were in a dream. So maybe the first little takeaway I'd give people is, if you are ever lucky enough, and I say that not flippantly, I say that from my heart, if you're ever lucky enough to become lucid and aware within a nightmare, don't wake yourself up. Because every time you wake yourself from a nightmare, it's like a therapy session cut short. Unnecessarily, that nightmare has to replay, not because you're being punished, but because that internal therapy session has been cut short and it needs to be completed. And this is why we have recurring nightmares. So for people who might be experiencing nightmares, if you are ever lucid within one, try and stay in it. But essentially a lucid dream is any dream where you know that you're dreaming as you're dreaming and then can choose to direct the dream at will.
That's incredible. I was actually thinking about that because I had one patient of mine when I was still practicing, and that patient used to constantly have dreams and nightmares, and they were so bad that they would put their alarm on to wake them up.
Oh,
and
wow.
I would so it was going all night long. So besides that disrupting sleep, you and I and everyone who knows how important sleep is, you can imagine how that disrupted. But the nightmares just never went away until the issue was actually faced. So that's such a good point that you raise.
Yeah. And of course, the nightmares will end either when the nightmare is resolved through the dream state or the issue that has led to the nightmare is resolved in the waking state. So it doesn't have to be resolved through lucid dreaming, but until it is resolved, those nightmares will keep coming back. So yeah, I can totally see why that patient thought that was the best thing to do, wake themselves from a nightmare, but no wonder the nightmare kept recurring.
Exactly. It was not until it was faced and dealt with that it actually started making the transition. So Charlie, to help someone understand, there's a point that you made when I very first heard you, and I thought that was fantastic. It helped me understand the experience. And you said you can always know as well. You said one thing already. If you feel, I've got to wake myself up, that's already indication of a lucid dream. The second thing is if you dream of someone who's alive in your dream, but you know that they've actually passed.
So this be a dream sign. Yeah. So if you're in the dream and you see a dead relative, then that can be a great indication that you're definitely dreaming. And in fact, a lot of people, their first lucid dreams will be there. I'll say, how did you know that you were dreaming? And they'll say, well, I was in the dream, my dead grandmother appeared. And I thought, wow, well, she died many years ago, so I must be dreaming. And of course, that actually gives you a very interesting experience. Not only are you now conscious in the unconscious mind, but you also have an opportunity to dialogue with that dead relative. And here comes a belief system thing. Some people believe they're actually connecting with their dead relative in the dream. I tend to say, well, even if it's not actually that you're connecting with their spirit in the dream, you're connecting with the memory association you have with them. And actually, you can still do some very powerful grief integration work through working with dead relatives in lucid dreams, regardless of whether they're a projection of your own mind or actually the spirit. Who knows?
We don't know. So could you give an example of that? I know that's quite a challenging question and a big question to ask you, and I don't expect you to answer fully, but I know this has triggered something for people. How would you do something like that? How would you do grief integration work if you think of someone in a nightmare?
Okay.
Or in a dream. It could be a dream or a nightmare. It could be one of the two. Very
cool question. In fact, I've got a second edition of my first book coming out soon. It's like a 10-year anniversary second edition. And
Fantastic.
One of the big chapters or sections that's new is working with grief through lucid dreaming. So yes, let's absolutely look at that. Let's say that you have lost somebody and before they went, you were unable to have a conversation that needed to be had. There's things that need to be said which weren't said, or there was some sort of letting go process that you haven't been able to do. In the same way as you might work with a waking state therapist who might do something like chair therapy, where they get you to imagine that your dead loved one is sitting on a chair and you would say everything that you need to say. Then you might step into that chair, embody the dead loved one, imagine that you are them, and then respond back and go back and forth until there's nothing left to be said. In the lucid dream, you can do a very similar thing. Now, let's say that the lucid dream, just for the sake of argument, is all just a projection of your mind. Let's say that if I dream of my dead mum, it's not really my dead mum. It's just my projection of my dead mum. So much of our waking state relationships are based on projection that if we meet simply a projection of a dead loved one in lucid dream, there's still a lot of powerful integration work we can do. Because, of course, so much of our experience of how they made us feel and anything that needs to be said or any letting go is based on projection anyway. So I'd say let's not get tied up on whether they're real or not. It doesn't matter. You can still do really powerful work. Let's say there was a conversation that needed to be had and you become lucid in a space with a dead relative. You can have that conversation and it will feel so real. This is a big thing about lucid dreaming. It's for many people an experience of hyperreality. You expect it to be like really dreamlike, like they show in Hollywood movies when they show a dream sequence and it goes to like soft focus and kind of, there's dry ice and stuff like that. Or dream. Lucid dream is not like that. A lucid dream is like, bam, full HD, high definition. So it's very, very realistic. So if you can meet a dead loved one in a lucid dream, it will feel very, very real. In fact, it doesn't only feel real, neurologically, it is experienced as real. And this is the real crux of all lucid dream healing and integration. Once you become lucid, the prefrontal cortex switches on. And as far as the brain is concerned, prefrontal cortex activation is associated with wakefulness, being awake. So once you become lucid, although your mind knows you're dreaming, of course, that's the definition of a lucid dream, your brain thinks you're awake. And the brain will start laying down neural pathways in a lucid dream in exactly the same way it does when you're awake.
Incredible.
So if you're in the lucid dream and you have a powerful conversation with the dead loved one where you say what needs to be said, or you finally let them go, or you have a hug, or you experience, the love that you never felt from them, as far as the brain is concerned, you didn't dream about that. You actually did that. As far as the brain is concerned, you actually connected with that person and you had that experience. You said what needed to be said. They responded to you. You had that embrace. You let them go. And the next day, the hippocampus, the part of the brain that takes short-term to long-term memory, will replace that, will take the memory from the lucid dream and file it in the brain in a waking state memory. It won't say like, this is a dream memory. Say, this is a waking state memory. And we believe this is one of the biological underpinnings of how lucid dreaming can be such a powerful trauma integration tool. Because if you integrate a trauma in the lucid dream, the brain doesn't think you dreamt about it. The brain thinks you actually did it and will restore or replace that memory in favor of the old traumatic memory. So the same with a grieving loved one. And I had this with my mom and with my Buddhist teacher, who both died within a few months of each other last year. And for both of them, I had powerful lucid dreams. And I remember with Rob Nairn, I became lucid and he was there teaching. And I was, I'm dreaming. And he was he was like on a chair, how he used to teach, like looking down, and there were loads of people sitting at his feet, literally kind of at the guru's feet. And I became lucid. And the first thing I said, I went, Rob, one more teaching. Give me one more teaching. What's the final teaching? And he looked at me and he said, and it's strange because this word doesn't exist, but this is what he said. He said, the aphrodescence of kindness. And I went, the aphrodescence of kindness? And he went, yes, kindness. And I went, kindness is the final teaching. And he went, kindness, Charlie, kindness. Bang.
Wow.
And I don't know if it was really him or just my projection of him, but I know that I had an experience where my teacher, whether it was my inner teacher or the actual external teacher in spirit form, I don't know if I believe that myself, gave me this final teaching that kindness is the most important thing. And that's such an important teaching and so true. And I grab hold of that and try and embody it. I don't know if it was really him or not, but I know that I woke up and I felt that I had received that final teaching, that I could let him go, that there was no more kind of grasping at the teacher who's left me. There was a sense of, no, the teacher's moved on and he's given me the final teaching. And now maybe my job's to embody that.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, I love what you're saying. And obviously as a neuroscientist, I totally agree with the fact that, well, it's just amazing how it's with our mind we change the brain. So why not when we're sleeping? It makes so much sense. And you explained so beautifully. And I want to reiterate that people get what you said, how your brain, because your frontal cortex does not switch on when you're asleep. So when you go into a lucid dream or you're having a vision or something like that, your frontal cortex does. And because your mind is telling it to do that. And then during the day, as you said, the hippocampus transitions the memory from short to long term, and then it builds it into the networks. That is then experienced because the brain just does what the mind tells it to do. So the mind is telling it to do that. It doesn't distinguish. So then that becomes the pathway, the mind-brain-body network pathway that drives us. So have I summarized correctly what you
So much better than I could have said it.
No, you did such a great job there. So I love that. And then, it just makes me think of something that you and I will explore, I know, in another discussion, but I'm just going to throw it out there. And that is kind of like near-death experiences, because what you've described with a lucid dream is so similar to what people experience. So that is going to be another conversation I'd love to dive into with you at some point for sure.
Ready for that.
Very, very interesting. But for now, let's talk about you. One of the things you do so well is help people to understand the signs of lucid dreaming. And you've mentioned 2 already. So if we could maybe talk about those, and then let's talk a bit more about PTSD and this research that you did, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. So let's look a bit at how people can start having lucid dreams.
Yes. Lovely.
The first thing they need to do is to be remembering and recalling their dreams. And the first thing I'd say about that is that everybody dreams. Everybody dreams every night if you sleep.
Absolutely.
You dream. But there's a large sector of society who think, I don't dream. I mean, every month I'll meet someone and say, but I don't dream. And what they mean is I don't remember my dreams. But everybody's dreaming. But first of all, we need to set our intention to remember. And by setting that intention before we go to sleep, actually, most people find that if they fall asleep over and over in the hypnagogic, as they fall asleep saying something like, tonight, I remember my dreams. I have excellent dream recall over and over again as they fall asleep. It acts like a self-hypnotic suggestion. And most people find they can remember their dreams within 1 or 2 nights. Why do we need to remember our dreams? Because unless you know what you're dreaming about, it's going to be hard to find those signs that indicate that you're dreaming. So let's say after about a week of remembering your dreams and writing them down, you look back over your dream diary and you think, are there any patterns that are emerging? Oh yeah, I often dream about being back at school, or I often dream about my dead relatives, or I often dream about the beach we used to go to as a child, or something like that. Once you recognize these things that only happen in your dreams, you create a subconscious trigger called the lucidity trigger, which then associates those things with dreaming. So now suddenly the beach from childhood equals dreaming. Dead relatives equals dreaming. Being back at school equals dreaming. The next week, if you're lucky, you might have a similar dream where you dream you're back at school. But this time, when you're back at school, something's triggered in the brain. And it's a very strange experience when you first have it, because you'll be back in a dream that you're back at school or with your dead relative. And you have this feeling of deja vu, this sense of like, oh, I'm supposed to remember something. And then you remember in the dream, wait, this is one of my dream signs, an indicator that I could be dreaming. That lucidity trigger is becoming triggered within the unconscious mind as you're dreaming. And then you have the realization, oh, wait, my dead grandmother, that must mean I'm dreaming. And this process of recognizing the dream sign, setting the trigger, and the trigger being activated is one of the fundamental steps towards lucid dreaming. And actually, most people, if they've had a spontaneous lucid dream, if you ask them, how did you know you were dreaming? They will take you through that process. They'll say, oh, well, I was in the dream. I saw something that was completely impossible. Or I was back in a place where I no longer live. And I thought, I don't live there anymore. I'm dreaming. So this process occurs, but it's all dependent on remembering your dreams. Because until you get to know what you're dreaming about, you're unlikely to know that you're dreaming from within the dream.
Mm-hmm. So good. That's amazing. Okay, so let's talk about PTSD. And you did, because that's such a, I mean, we know it's a description of behavior patterns. It's not an illness per se, but it can disrupt people's lives to the point, so it can disrupt people's lives to the point where they are destroyed, but they're not mentally ill. They just are in a very disordered mind state because of an experience that has really disrupted their networks and mind-body networks. So you've just done phenomenal research on that. Can you just give us a little bit of background on what you've done? There's published papers on your work, and then a little bit of maybe what could people do? How could people understand this simplistically and maybe start applying it in their life until they get their hands on your work? Sure.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for that description of PTSD. I have a big problem with this word disorder. I really think it should be changed to display, post-traumatic stress display.
I agree.
It's disordered about, the body expressing itself after traumatic. It's completely normal. Like having nightmares after event is completely normal. Panic attacks, flashbacks, these things aren't necessarily something to be medicated away. In all cases. They're coming to allow. The classic, simplistic idea that we have, but it's the classic one from Peter Levine, I think, popularized it, of the antelope shaking after they've been chased by a lion. Mm-hmm. And we see someone after a traffic accident or something like that, sitting by the side of the car, and they're shaking, and we're going, calm down, stop shaking, or stop crying. In fact, we kind of should be saying, yes, accentuate.
Get it out. Yeah.
And yet allow those tears to flow, allow it to release. We really put it backwards the way we look at it. And I think even our terminology of the post-traumatic stress disorder is symbolic of that backwards approach.
Exactly. Biomedical neuroreductionistic approach.
That's a whole other talk we could go on to there. I'm so glad that we're page about this. It's actually quite rare to find someone who thinks like this. Thank you. Okay, so
that's all my work, Charlie. That's my entire focus of my work is changing this whole philosophy. So we're going to do, just for everyone to know, there's going to be a very in-depth podcast after this. We will go into depth on these topics with Charlie. So just so that people know.
Great.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Okay, so this research. So about 7 or 8 years ago, I started working with military veterans. It was not an intention of mine, but a military veteran called Keith McKenzie came to one of my lucid dreaming retreats. He was suffering with nightmares and PTSD. He had a big breakthrough. His nightmares stopped. And then he sent me this email saying that I healed more of my PTSD in that 4-day lucid dreaming retreat.
Wow.
Years of therapy. And I remember asking him straight after some, back and forth saying, oh, mate, do you mind if I put that quote on my website? Because it's such a good, quote. He said, yeah. So it was on my website for a few years. but we kind of lost contact. And then a few years later, he got back in contact and he said, I'd become a meditation teacher and a Buddhist chaplain within the armed forces. And
Beautiful.
I remember he said, a Buddhist chaplain in the armed forces sounds like a vegetarian butcher, doesn't it?
That's such a good description.
Fine. But he actually said, British armed forces have loads of Buddhists, especially because of the Gurkhas, have a big Nepali regiment.
Oh.
The majority might be Buddhist or Hindu. So actually there was a lot of Buddhism in the British Army. So he was running these retreats for other veterans who were working with nightmares and PTSD. And would I come and use some of the lucid dreaming stuff that worked for him with them? I agreed, but I wasn't sure. It worked for some people, not all. We then refined it. We added in breathwork exercises, qigong, body work. Combined with the lucid dreaming, we were onto something that seemed to work very well within a few years. So I started running these workshops online and in person with military veterans for the next few years. Then a couple of years ago, I got an email from a guy called Dr. Garrett Yunt from the Institute of Noetic Sciences in California, who'd heard about these workshops. And he said, I've heard about these workshops. I've heard you've got really good results with people's nightmares. I hear that most of them, their nightmares just stop after they do this training. I said, yeah, maybe, yeah, the majority, not the vast majority, but many do. He then said, do you think lucid dreaming could be used to treat PTSD? Not just nightmares, but actually the waking state symptoms of PTSD, like panic attacks, flashbacks, depression, anxiety. And I said, I actually don't know. I haven't seen any research on it. Possibly. I know that nightmares are such a big part of PTSD that if you can heal them, that might have a big effect, but who knows? And I really didn't know. A couple of years of applying for funding and creating this project, we began. And we did a 1-week scientific study with 55 people, some of whom were veterans, but in the end, actually, the majority were not veterans. The majority were civilians with CPTSD, actually. A lot of people with complex childhood sexual abuse trauma, as well as veterans, as well as people who've been in car crashes, really wide range. 55 people, all of whom had chronic PTSD. So to get onto the study, you had to have chronic PTSD or treatment-resistant PTSD. So 100% of the people had chronic PTSD. At the beginning of the week, we took their PTSD score using the DSM-5 model. I mean, it's quite arbitrary, but it's a list of dozens of questions where you get this level of essentially how traumatized somebody is. We took that at the beginning of the week. Then we had a 1-week, essentially lucid dreaming workshop where they were with me 2 full days and then 2 hours a day for the next week, teaching them how to lucid dream because it is a learnable skill, and specifically how to use their lucid dreams to integrate their trauma. So this could be becoming lucid. Either some of them became lucid in their recurring nightmares that they were back in Iraq, for example, and they were able to get lucid. And rather than trying to wake themselves up, they reminded themselves, oh, I'm dreaming. I'm not really back in Iraq. So what have I never tried to do before? So some of them would change the ending of the dream. So suddenly they're in a firefight in Iraq, but they fly off to safety. Or the woman who was in a car crash, she actually made the car like swerve so it didn't hit the wall. So they could kind of change the endings. And we had quite good results with that. But even better results were the people who became lucid in their recurring nightmares and then actually allowed the nightmare to play out, knowing that there was nothing that could hurt them. So actually the ones who just was the firefight going, my body's asleep in bed. This is just a hallucination. This is just a trauma replay. I'm fine. Nothing can hurt me here. And when they did that, some people like the bullets turned to flowers and stuff, like really amazing imagery. There was one woman who the main symptom for PTSD was chronic pain, physical pain. And she became lucid. And in the dream, she called out, pain body, I release you. Pain body, I release you. And when she did this big lozenge, like a throat lozenge, a golden throat lozenge appeared in the dream. Very interesting symbol of healing. And this throat lozenge starts radiating golden light into her. And she wakes up kind of, shaking. So very different dream reports, but essentially we took a lucid dream. And then in their lucid dream, they would engage some sort of healing related to their trauma, as I've just explained. And at the end of the week, we took their PTSD score again to see had their trauma level stayed the same, increased, decreased. When they first got the results, the scientists thought there was a problem with the data collection because the scores had dropped so low. So they double checked, they triple checked, and then they said, well, look, let's do a 1-month follow-up because maybe it's just a strange flash in a pan, maybe something, and maybe the day they stop seeing you every day or stop working together, it'll fall off. So we did a 1-month follow-up and their PTSD score actually continued to stay that low and actually got 1 point lower on average.
Wow.
So what were the results? We found that 85% of the 55 people in the group, by the end of the week, their PTSD score had dropped so low, it was beneath PTSD threshold, meaning they were no longer actually classed as having clinical PTSD.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was really, 15 years I've been doing this and been aware of the research, and I have been part of other scientific studies before, but we've never seen results like this.
And this is the paper, Charlie, that is published in APA PsychNet, the one, where's it?
Yeah, it's in Traumatology, Journal of Traumatology, June 2023.
Yes, and I had it up here and then it disappeared. Okay. It went.
The title, Decreased PTSD after Lucid Workshop.
So I'll put that, I'll let people can find that. They can actually go to your website and they can find that and they can read it. It's fascinating. And it was done, you went, I was looking for your name there. I see you weren't an author, but even so that that particular one.
My name off because I have a vested interest in lucid dreaming because I write books about it. So no, I said, keep my name off it because that's
what I thought you'd done. I thought you'd done that, but I want people to know that you're associated.
Did the same on the control study. Because actually since then, we've done a 100-person randomized control using exactly the same protocol and we replicated results. That hasn't actually been published yet, but we did it again since then. So yeah, we can be doubly sure that this seems to be replicable.
That's fantastic. With 100 people, so it's almost double. And then did you also do the 1 month follow-up?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. So this is evidence-based. What I want to stress with people that this is evidence-based. There have been people here dreaming, they think this is maybe something woo-woo. This is not. This is hardcore scientific stuff. The work that I do on an unconscious mind, this is what we're talking about here with this lucid dream. It's very real and this is very, very helpful. We don't have to constantly revert to the biomedical model for, medicating and suppressing symptoms are not going to ever help you. What Charlie...
My ears. Yeah. Just to back up on that, we had, when the pilot study came out, we actually struggled to get it published. People weren't saying the results are incorrect. They were saying, wow, great results, but not for us. Once we completed the 100-person randomized control and we replicated under control conditions, then suddenly everyone was much more open to publishing. So I think sometimes we think there's kind of a conspiracy within the scientific literature world. I don't think it's that. I think it's just people don't want to risk their job or their livelihood on something that might not be replicable. But once you do it, then people are more likely to publish it. But yeah, it is there. I mean, without doubt, both the pilot and the follow-up 100-person randomized control show that lucid dreaming, without doubt, is one of the most powerful interventions for post-traumatic stress disorder currently available. By the end, people had stopped having flashbacks, stopped having nightmares. We had the oldest person on the first study was a Vietnam veteran who had been working with PTSD for decades, since the end of the Vietnam War. And he was one of the people who had the big breakthrough as well. It's non-medical, it's non-invasive, it's non-addictive, it's free, and you literally do it in your sleep.
It's fantastic.
I get why people might be skeptical. It sounds ridiculous, right? But the caveat it does take some effort. Things like therapy, medication would be much easier, I'm sure, much easier. These people had to give a whole week of their lives training 10 hours a day for 2 days and then 4 hours a day, 3 hours a day for the next few days. They gave a full week of their life, but they gave a week of their life to get decades of their life back. Because some of these people have been working with PTSD for many, many years. So lucid dreaming, it does take some effort and it does need to be taught and there is stuff to do. But if you follow the process and you do it, it can have life-changing results. Really life-changing results.
That is so key. Life-changing results. It's evidence-based. The studies are out there. It's replicable. And what you're talking, three words that I tell people all the time in my work is embrace, process, and reconceptualize. And, I believe that really applies to what you're doing with lucid dreaming. And it just makes so much sense. We as humans are not just this physical brain, which is what there has been so much emphasis in the last few years. And what I love about your work and the help that you give people with their mental health is, go beyond just what you can see. There is this whole realm that's available to us of dreaming. And as you say, we all dream. And there's something that we can use. This is something that we can use. And as you said, it's free. You can do it in your sleep. I love how you pointed that out there. Charlie, in wrapping up, 2 things. What would you say to people that are listening now that have been very, I think excited, I know excited by what you've just said and see potential, because you described in your study that this wasn't just for vets. This was, all of us have got trauma to some extent. We all live with day-to-day struggles. We all live with bad habits that we've developed that were coping strategies that have become bad habits. We all have levels of trauma. True trauma is what's happened to us. There's been a lot of concept creep around the word trauma, which you and I both know. But the genuine trauma is the sexual abuse, the war vets, and so on. All of us are living with a certain combination of those, and there isn't a human that is exempt from not battling daily with stuff and the challenges of life and all that kind of stuff. What would you say to the audience about this and how lucid dreaming, how could you wrap it up and sort of give them a sort of nice summary, pearls of wisdom to help them through life?
I think I would say learn to lucid dream. It is a learnable skill. So buy a book, go onto YouTube, do an online course, come to a workshop. Doesn't have to be mine, but, teach yourself how to lucid dream. Because if you do, you teach yourself a skill that can radically alter the way you perceive the world and the way your brain functions. And this is not, we've looked
Beautiful.
at lucid dreaming can be used to increase athletic performance. They found that if you go into the lucid dream and do squats, you can do more squats in the waking state. I mean, this is crazy.
Wow.
You can your body, you can change your brain. Anything you can treat through hypnotherapy, you can treat through lucid dreaming. Because in a similar way as you gain, conscious access to the subconscious, in lucid dreaming, you're gaining conscious access to the depths of the unconscious. And I think one of the reasons why the veterans communities find lucid dreaming so appealing is it's a solo activity. You're in there by yourself. There's no medication to rely on or therapist to rely on. You are doing it yourself. And I think it's a deeply empowering process. And I can't think of many actually, apart from the meditative arts, where you are working in a solo way to really heal yourself at those deepest levels. So learn to lucid dream. And there's loads of free resources I've got. There's no hard sell on my books, but there's loads of free stuff I've got on YouTube. There's loads of stuff you can find. It's more applicable now than it was, 2,000 years ago in ancient Tibet. It's like, nowadays we all say we don't have time for our spiritual practice. We don't have time for our self-development, but we sleep, right? Yeah. So if there was a really powerful self-development tool that you could do while you were literally sleeping, I think that's even more applicable to 2024 than it was in the Middle Ages. So really harness this. Anybody can do it. Children naturally lucid dream. We know that from several studies. So everybody listening to this probably has had multiple lucid dreams as a child. They just don't remember. So it's not really even something you need to learn. It's something you need to remember how to do again. Oh, and it's really fun. I should say that. This is this really powerful spiritual practice, integration of trauma, amazing reprogramming your brain. But also it's like the most fun you can have in your pajamas. It makes going to bed exciting. So people find that their sleep gets better because they're going to bed earlier so they can get more dream time to do more lucid dreaming. So there's a whole range of kind of indirect health benefits as well.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I think your next book should be called How to Have Fun in Your Pajamas. There's so many different little connotations around that. So.
Perfect. That'll be a bestseller, I'm sure.
Oh, that'll be a bestseller for sure. Oh, Charlie, where can people get hold of you to get hold of your books and get on your website and so on?
Oh, so I'd make a very bad spy. You can find me everywhere. Just put my name, Charlie Morley, into Google and you find my website, charliemorley.com, Charlie Morley on Instagram and Facebook and all of that. Yeah, you'll find me.
And your books are amazing. And you have a course on Mind Valley as well, like mine. And I have to tell you a little secret that I've been using my neurocycle system, which we've spoken a little bit about, but I need to tell you more, which is basically how the mind changes the brain. It's neuroplasticity in action. And I've been using that to help me lucid dream more effectively, to try and get myself ready for it, to set my intention. So that was just another little thing I wanted to throw in there. I wanted to test that out. That's been amazing.
That we need for the workshop we intend to do.
Exactly. So it's so much fun. Charlie, thank you for your time, your wisdom, your input. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.